So I started in suicide prevention, as Ann said, about a year ago. And I have been to a lot of walks. And I have to say, not to keep going on this, but You Matter is probably the best title and theme that I've ever heard or ever come across. It's very significant to me. I think about what it means, you matter. What does it mean to matter? It means you're significant. It means you're important. It means you have reason and meaning and purpose. It means you are needed. To matter means you are loved. Incredible words. I think it's very powerful to me because it plays a lot into the message that I like to share. There's two main elements of things that I hold very, very close to me that have gotten me through some of the darkest moments in my life. That is belief and trust. I have this deep, deep, unswayed belief that there is reason for all things. Reason for things in my life. Now I'm not talking about world hunger and war. I'm talking about life, me, my life. This is what I have to think to be well. I believe there is reason for the events in my life. And I trust. I have trust that at the very least, those reasons are bare minimum to teach me something. Teach me something about myself, about the world around me, about the people around me, about how we live, about life. When I was 8 years old, I came home from school one day. The house was empty, and I was alone, and it was very quiet. And my job for that day, my chores were to wash the dishes. In the sink, there was a large chef's knife at the bottom of the soapy water. I saw it right away, and I started thinking of what it could do. I started thinking that it would put me in a position where I didn't have to live life anymore. I didn't have to experience what life was at 8 years old. Things were really difficult for me at that time. From the time of about 6, I was being molested by a man in our neighborhood who was mentally handicapped. What darkened that situation so much more is that these incidents actually occurred in a crawl space beneath my mother's house. There was times when I was laying in the dirt, crying, and I could hear the footsteps of my family above me. I was very alone in this. I was too scared to tell anybody. But somehow, kids in the neighborhood knew about it. Kids at school knew about it. And I started to get bullied and picked on for it. There was times I can say I was absolutely terrorized. So, that was my reality. That was the world to me. That was what I knew as life being. And when I stood in that kitchen and I was doing the dishes and I saw this knife and I was thinking, man, if this is what life is and I don't want to live it, I don't want anything to do with it. It's not for me. But there was this little part of me, this little part that I think we all have, this innate ability inside us that tells us that there is a purpose for all of us, that we matter, that the events of our lives matter, that someday this is going to be worth it and there's got to be more to it than this. I tried so hard to convince myself that. I remember standing there at 8 years old in my kitchen, sobbing, and trying so hard to hold on to that belief. But the other part of that I was missing, that trust. That part that told me that with my mind. I mean, you think about it, belief, it comes from our heart, right? It's immeasurable. You can't convince somebody to believe in something. It's something you feel. It's an emotion. It's like love. It comes from our heart. But trust is with our mind. Trust is real. It's facts. It's predictable. You know the outcome. I tried so hard to believe that there was a reason that this was okay and I did matter and things did matter and it was going to add up to something. But the reality around me, that trust element that I needed so bad, was not there. The reality said life is horrible. Life hurts. I am alone and I don't matter. And the things that I was experiencing didn't matter. But I did everything I could to hold on to the belief. And I slid down the cabinets, I put the knife on the floor, I rolled up in a ball, and I lay there alone, crying my eyes out. And that's where I stayed for about the next 12 years of my life. somewhere between not really wanting to die, looking for that belief, and trying so hard to find that trust that it was going to matter and it was going to be okay. When I reached my teens, early teens, about 13, we moved from that house and away from that man and that crawl space and those kids. But in my teenage years, I started to really get some of the issues that I think we all get as teenagers, that teenage depression and angst, the stuff that we all go through just being, I don't even have to explain it, we all know what it's like. For me, I had all these issues that were never being dealt with and never diagnosed and never talked about. So to go into what it's like being a teenager, to walk into that realm with all these issues alone, fighting these two parts inside of me, it got very, very, very difficult. I started to get extremely depressed. And I started to withdraw incredibly and find myself going more and more internal. I found myself counting things. Just counting. Stand in a room and count the blinds. I would have to. If I didn't, then something bad was going to happen. It was a fear-based thought, constantly. If the white blinds didn't matter, then I'd have to count the dark lines inside of it. It evolved into the fact that I had to land on a specific number. If I found myself landing on an element of 3, I'd have to start over. It made no sense to me, but I had to do it. I called my brother and I said, Jeff, I'm not going to make it. So they made arrangements and brought me to a doctor. The doctor brought me in his office. He was sort of this older man, kind of had that, been there, done that sort of an attitude. I told him what was going on with me, and he said, you have OCD. It's obsessive-compulsive disorder. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain, the anxiety and depression and fear that you probably feel that is likely just the side effects of the OCD. We have a medication called Nafrenil for that. Next. That was it. To him, I felt like I didn't matter to him. I felt like my problems weren't that significant. Nobody was taking it as serious as it really was. The hospital determined that the rituals and behaviors associated with obsessive-compulsive disorder took up 95% of my waking hours. So pretty much all day I was counting. I was internalizing thoughts. I had very, very fear-based rituals that I would have to do. And I would categorize fear in itself as a mental health issue, along with depression or anything else like that. Fear completely consumed me. All my day was spent being afraid of everything I faced, and every one I faced, for no reason, it had no significance, nothing behind it. I was just always afraid. It started to really break me down. I saw the world through the eyes of depression constantly. I moved from my mother's house when I was about 16, 17 years old, and I moved into a friend's garage. I spent the rest of my years in this garage. I think of some of the things that I just want to share with you briefly, some of the things that I think helped me and some of the things that worked against me during those days, because those were some of the darkest days that I have ever experienced. I remember when I took my pills, my medication, and this was really important to me to look back on, because I think of the mistake I made. I used to carry my pills everywhere, and I took them with discipline. I never missed when I was supposed to take them. I knew that they were supposed to help me. But I took them because I was broken. I took pills and medication because something was wrong with me. And I remembered visualizing those days when I had really, really bad days I couldn't go to school, I couldn't get out of the garage, I couldn't find a bus, I just didn't want to do anything. Those days I visualized shaking the pills out in my hand. Like those scene in the movie where the guy's about to have a heart attack and he's trying so hard to get the pills in him. That's how I visualized things when I took those pills. I never stopped to think that I took medication to get better. I took medication to get well. Not because I was broken, but because I was taking the responsibility of making myself well. If I stopped to visualize that taking those pills was a step forward, was a step in the right direction, maybe they would have had a different effect on me than instead of every time I swallowed one down, I thought I was more and more hurt, I was more and more broken. I've been hospitalized 5 times in my teenage years. I met a lot of doctors, a lot of emergency room visits, a lot of people in ambulances, a lot of therapists and counselors. And I can't tell you how many times I was asked the question, do you want to die? I gotta give credit to that. It's a very important question. You have to ask it. But one thing I was never asked, one way I never looked at it, was do you want to live? Because for me, someone who experienced thoughts of suicide for 20 years, suicide for me was the first thought every day. It was that significant. It was my way out of every single situation. It was my way of coping. It was my way to combat my own fears. It was a solution. For someone who lived with thoughts like that for 20 years, saying no, I don't want to die, doesn't mean I want to live. If suicide is this right here, if suicide is my bottom and that's my lowest point, saying no, I don't want to die, might just mean that I'm right here. I'm only an inch above it. But wanting to live, wanting to experience life, wanting to accept what life has to offer me, wanting to step forward and out of the darkness and keep going, man, that's up at the ceiling. I think asking someone if they want to live and looking at it from that perspective is extremely important. I lived with depression and everything else that goes along with it, the OCD and the issues. I lived very alone, and I fought so hard to find significance and meaning in the events that I had been through in life, and tried to find some element of trust that it was all going to work out, that it was all going to make sense. And I think one of the things that would have helped me a lot more during those darkest days in my teenage years was letting my walls down a little bit. And I don't mean to be cliche, but really the fact is, I believed that help comes from family and friends. That's where you go to get help. That's where you go for love. We see it on TV all the time. We see it in sitcoms, right? I mean, that's American life. You go to your mom and dad and it's all set. You go to your best friend and it's all taken care of. I believe that. And I thought to myself, if I can't get help from my family and friends, how is this doctor going to help me? How is a stranger going to help me? How am I going to help myself? And I never gave those things a chance. And when I first met some of the doctors that I went to, the first doctor I went to gave me an elastic that he put around my wrist and told me to snap it when I get stuck on a compulsive thought. I mean, think about that for a minute. 95% of my waking hours are spent on an obsessive-compulsive action, and I'm supposed to snap this to get me out of it. I ended up snapping this thing 598 times. It actually evolved into a pain symptom through OCD, where I had to hurt myself up to a certain threshold of pain, or it didn't feel right, I had to continue. So I go and see this doctor, and I'm thinking, man, what am I doing? These guys don't know what they're talking about. It's ridiculous. And I never gave him a chance, not thinking that, you know what, you don't make best friends by talking to somebody across the lunch table one time. You don't open up a door like that. You don't open up a dialogue like that with complete strangers on a bus. It takes work. And if that guy didn't work for me, all I had to do was go to the next guy. And if he didn't work for me, go to the next woman. If she didn't work for me, go to the next person. Just give them a chance until you get to the one that works. And you develop that relationship, and you're okay with talking to them. I never did things like that. And things just got darker and darker and darker, and that belief that I tried so hard to hold on to just went away. And one night, I sat on the edge of a rented bed, and I filled my body with pills. I spent the next 3 days in the intensive care unit. They had needles in my veins and monitors on my skin. They took blood from the back of my head because they had to measure the amount of poison that was in me. They restrained my arms to the legs to the bed because I was fighting everybody who came in to help me. I spent the next few weeks and months following that, changing who I was and my life. I had to look at what I was going to do differently. And I can say to you that the events that followed my suicide attempt changed my life. And I want to be very clear when I say this. My suicide attempt did not change my life whatsoever. I didn't wake up and feel guilty. I didn't wake up and feel ashamed. I didn't feel bad for what I did. I wasn't angry. I was just really numb. What changed me is recognizing that I had reached my absolute bottom. I had reached the lowest point in my life, and how sad is it that I had to get to suicide to see that? I wish to God that never had to happen, but it did. Recognizing that I was at my lowest point ever is what made me decide to change. I got very motivated. I took the anger that I was feeling and I transformed it into determination. I took the fear that I was feeling and I transformed it into desperation. I became no longer afraid of what happens if what I do next. It became what happens if I don't do anything. What happens if I don't move? And I looked very hard at my personal belief system. The belief that there's a reason for things and trust that that will make sense somehow. I started looking at my life. I looked at my future. Instead of looking so much at my past, I started really looking at my future. If I was going to move forward, if I was going to progress in any way and be well and never end up back at my bottom, how am I going to go forward with all these issues that I had to deal with? These events that will never leave me. It's not easy to just say let go of it. I spent 6 years under a house. You don't let go of something like that. That's going to stay with me forever. But if I'm going to move forward in life, if I'm going to take off from that bottom and I'm going to step forward and I'm going to move in the right direction, how am I going to take an experience like that with me? I believe wholeheartedly that there is a reason for everything. I have to. It's how I stay well. It's my own system that works for me, and I hold it sacred. If there's a reason that I was put under that house for 6 years of my life, don't just let me feel this empty philosophy. Help me understand it. What is the reason for things like this? I got real serious about it. Real serious. I started writing out what it was. What did I gain from that experience? What did it leave me with? Being stuck under a house, being molested, what did that leave me with? It left me with trust issues. It left me with depression. It left me with self-confidence issues. It left me hating myself, hating other people, hating my parents. But that kind of stuff isn't going to help me in life. None of that stuff is what I want to take with me. That's ugly. It's dark. That's what brought me to suicide. I don't want that anymore. What else did it give me? What did I learn from it? For me, in my own personal experience, I can tell you that from the years of molestation, if there's anything I gained from it, if there's anything I learned from it, it was compassion. The way I write about it in the book is that compassion is to see the hurt in the eyes of another no matter how badly we hurt ourselves. If that's what I had to go through to learn that level of compassion, that empathy, to know what it's like, then it was somehow worth it to me. It somehow made sense. But there's a belief in that reason, and in that trust, inherently comes the trust that I gained something from it. I went through it with bullying. I mean, years of bullying. What did that teach me? What did I get from that? Again, just huge issues. But what did I really get out of that? I look at it almost like metaphorically, like a class, right? Imagine if I could say, I went to a class once. It was a life lesson class. It lasted about 10 years. They gave us real life scenarios. They would back me into a corner. They would send these people to totally mess with me. And they taught me almost a watchdog instinct. How to meet someone and gauge their intentions. How to meet someone and know if they were okay enough to trust. That's what I learned from being bullied. It didn't mess up my relationships. It didn't give me real trust issues. What it taught me is how to gauge the intentions of other people. Are they pure? Do they have my best interest at heart? Or is there a part to them that I really want nothing to do with? I've applied that to every person I've met in my life. If bullying is what I had to go through to teach me that, then I have reason, and then I have trust. And then that event mattered. I applied it to mental health issues, the OCD that forced me to absolutely absolutely break down more times than I could ever even explain to you. Most people get up and go through their day, they take a shower, they drive to work, they don't remember taking the rights and lefts, they just drone through it. There are things in their life that they sometimes think about, sometimes get caught up in some of the drama and they go to sleep and go to bed. With OCD, with depression, with the way mine was, every single thought that entered my mind needed to be stopped, needed to be analyzed, broken down, categorized, put away, sometimes rethought. Being in the mental health issues that I had gave me insight into how I think, a personal perspective that I don't think I ever could have gotten any other way. I've gained incredible self-awareness. And I give, as twisted as this may sound, I give credit to my sicknesses, my illnesses, and my mental health issues for keeping me well today. Because it put me so internal that I had to deal with myself. I had to deal with how I think. So now in order to stay well, I can see those problems before they ever get there, and I know how to turn them around. I can't tell you that there's a reason for everything. I'm not here to tell you. That's up to you. That's a belief. That's in your heart. That's for you to decide. But I can assure you that you can trust there is something to learn from every single thing we go through in life. Something to learn about the world, about who we are. And I think if we can figure out what it is that we need to learn, it helps us become closer to the people we are supposed to be, the person we were born to be, beyond the struggle, beyond the pain. And I can promise you, as someone who's done it, and walked a very long road, that when you get through it, and you get out of that darkness, you will see that you are made of gold, and you are significant, you are important, you are needed, and you matter. Thank you very much for your time.